and good morning. A few short years ago, it seems like a lifetime ago, my life was forever changed by a suicide. I look around at all your faces here today, the participants of the walk and the volunteers who work so hard to organize these events every year, and it just brings up so many feelings. First and foremost, such admiration for those of you whose lives have only just recently been touched by suicide, yet you're still here, regardless of the terrible pain that I know you're feeling. Sadness for the reason why all of us are here, but also hopeful that with these events, we will continue to change not only the judgments and stigmas of suicide, but also the frighteningly increasing numbers. 10 years ago, my younger son, Sonny, died by suicide. He was only 21 years old. Sonny was the joy of my life. He was so loving, and he cared so much for his family and friends, as well as complete strangers. He had a huge, compassionate heart, and volunteered for the causes and for the people that he felt had been all but abandoned by society. Once, when I had driven Sonny back up to the University of Washington after he'd come home for a weekend visit, we were walking to the grocery store, and we saw a homeless man, and he was just wandering, talking loudly to himself, and just seemed in such distress. Sonny walked up to him and just started talking to him in a calm, quiet voice and really listened. It was amazing watching the transformation in this man as he responded to Sonny's kindness. Sonny had such an open heart, and he cared so much for others who were suffering, but he never learned to protect his own heart. And Sonny died by suicide on July 27th, 2008. As difficult as it was at first to say the words, died by suicide, I've never refrained from using them. All his life, I was so proud of him, who he was. And as heartbreaking as a life ending by suicide is, I will never feel shame for him or the way he died. That wasn't what his life was about. But it was so hard losing Sonny. Right after he died, I was in a really dark place, as I know so many of you are familiar with. A good friend of mine went online and found that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention sponsored a support group here in Olympia for survivors of suicide, a term I'd never heard of before. It was so hard walking into that first meeting, not knowing what to expect, and so afraid I would just completely fall apart in front of strangers. But what I found there was a place of incredible compassion and understanding. Janice, our facilitator, I don't know if she's here today, she was incredible. She was so kind and just always seemed to know the right thing to say and when. And getting to know the other survivors and each of us hearing each other's stories, it gave us all that shared comfort of knowing that we were not alone on this difficult journey. And that in itself was priceless. I got so much from those meetings. And as the years went on, I continued going, not only for my own emotional support, but also because almost every meeting there would be new people all going through the same tragic loss. And I recognized my earlier self in their faces. I wanted to be there for them as so many were for me. I am so grateful for those meetings and the help and information that I got from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I've learned a lot over these last 10 years, but one of the most amazing things that I've experienced is that when I would talk about Sonny, tell his story, and people would ask about him and his passing, I would always tell them, I'm getting mixed up here. Anyway, let me start that again. When I would talk about him and in his passing, it would open so many doors. And it would allow other people to tell their stories as well, how their lives were changed by a suicide, and they were such hard stories to hear and to say. But I knew that those conversations were not accidental. They were happening because it was exactly what we needed to hear and express at that very moment. You know, every year, we hear or read in the news about a favorite entertainer, athlete, or celebrity who dies by suicide, and it is sad. But the actual number of people, our neighbors, our soldiers, our family, those numbers that we lose by suicide every year is staggering. In this country alone, there is an average of 44,965 suicides every year. That's about 123 completed suicides every day in this country alone. And the numbers are growing. It is frightening. But at the end of the day, I think what all of us here want for our departed loved ones is that they just be remembered. Not for how their lives ended, but for the wonderful people that they were here on this earth. Our participation in this walk, our supporting legislation requiring suicide prevention education for certain professions, and just being present at awareness rallies to educate the public, these are a few ways that we can honor our departed loved ones and bring a measure of comfort to ourselves in the hopes that with our efforts we can reach and help just even one other person and to prevent others from being forced to join the ranks of those of us known as survivors of suicide. Thank you.